Good evening and welcome to Flat Earth UK Live. Joining me tonight is Antonio Subirats, a flat earther and artist, who is going to tell us first and foremost how he found out the Earth is flat. Welcome to Flat Earth UK, Antonio.
Hey Nathan, how are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad at all, not too bad at all. Can you kick us off by telling us, how did you find out the Earth is flat?
I found out by, first of all, ignoring everything talking about the flat Earth until I came across a video linking the flat Earth to chemtrails. Now, I'm familiar with chemtrails, and I wondered how this person was associating the two. At first, I thought that maybe he was saying that chemtrails were being used to manipulate people's minds to believe that the world was flat because it's so absurd. So I thought, right, okay, I'll have a look. And he mentioned Matt Boylan, and I thought, okay, what is this? What he was actually explaining wasn't a very good explanation in terms of the flat Earth, but he mentioned the lack of curve. And I thought, okay, so I jotted Matthew Boylan down. I looked for him. I watched him. I thought, oh, this is looking a little bit more bona fide. And I then watched Mark Sargent's clues, Geronism, Eric Dubay, everybody else that I could find, and that was it. It completely gelled my suspicions about the world. Most of us have thought there's something wrong. There's something not right with the world, not just in politics. There's just something wrong. There's something's off kilter. And when you realize that it's flat, and what's off kilter is your illusion of what the world is, everything becomes very clear to see. And that's it. That's how I came across the flat Earth.
Definitely. I mean, one of the first things people will ask you when you talk about flat Earth is things like how the sun and moon works. This obviously all ties back into the calendar. I mean, are there any aspects that you've looked at with the calendar that sort of validate flat Earth or maybe disprove the globe?
Yes. There's some debate as to whether disproving the globe proves the flat Earth. And logically speaking, once you disprove the globe, then you either have a flat Earth or you have something else, but you don't have a globe. And the calendar tells us when the moon is going to be full. It basically gives us a structure so we can go and make observations. So my first video was about a daylight gibbous moon, which according to the model shouldn't be visible. It should be way beyond the horizon. And I looked at it, I thought this doesn't match the globe. This is confirmation from the real world, not just from people talking or explaining things, but the physical real world demonstrating that we're not on a globe. Unfortunately,
people who may not understand what gibbous moon actually is.
A gibbous moon is when it's gone past the full moon stage and is getting towards a quarter moon. The stage between full moon and quarter moon is called gibbous to various different degrees, but it's called a gibbous moon. And you have two series of gibbous moons. You have the waxing, which is growing towards full moon, and you have the waning, which is diminishing from full moon. Now, on the globe model, these events are happening around the back of the Earth, if you want to use the typical theory, which is we have the sun in one point, we have the Earth. Sometimes the moon is between us and the sun, or to the sides of the Earth, and sometimes it's behind the Earth. And when it's behind the Earth, you have gibbous to full moon to gibbous. To see the gibbous from the light side of the Earth, you have to see round the bend, just like seeing a full moon in the daytime. To see a full moon in the daytime on the globe is literally impossible. We see the full moon in the daytime, and usually what people do is they ignore their model of the world, of the globe, and they just see the full moon, and that's it. They assume that they're on a globe and it must just be visible from the globe. But when you look at the globe, you think, oh, hold on, we'd have to see right through the Earth to see this full moon. And people just don't bother doing that.
Yeah, sure. It makes no sense, but most people will ignore it. I mean, being an artist, do you think that's helped you in your flat Earth pursuits?
Well, funnily enough, I have, if I can give a shout out to some friends of mine, Glenn, Pete and Graham, really nice guys. We've had debates. I told them when I first came
Are these
across
your work colleagues that you mentioned in one of your videos?
yes, yes. But more than colleagues, they're friends. Okay. So I was in school with two of them, and when I first came across the flat Earth, I immersed myself in it. I saw it very clearly. It's very simple to understand. And I went to see them, and I told them that my mind had been blown, and everything was so much clearer. And told them about the flat Earth. And later on, we're always having debates about it, and they've said that I don't understand angles and that I don't understand perspective, that I don't understand the tools of my trade. And it's like, how can you rationalize having said that? Never mind having thought it. How can you rationalize it? How can you think that I don't understand how angles relate to perspective if what I'm doing is I'm portraying reality? I'm a realist painter and a realist illustrator. I wouldn't be able to do that if I didn't understand the relationship, you know, foreshortening, distance, how things, the interplay between things. But it's just any excuse to cling to the globe. And it's when I was a globalist that I was happy with the idea. I was an atheist and I was completely happy. I thought, nah, the death is not the end, but I'm not going to believe in some kind of entity. It's just some strangeness, dimensional thing to do with the world. This was my conclusion. But the globe, I was happy with everything. I read a lot on sci-fi. I read a lot of sci-fi, especially off-world sci-fi. You have sci-fi like Phil K. Dick, but that's based on the Earth. And then you have most of it is based on the Earth. It doesn't mention satellites. It's very little that mentions off-world. But I was very into the off-world science fiction. I understood it. I was, you know, intrigued by it. And I see that people who love that still, they don't want to say goodbye to that. They don't, you know, there's no way that they can conceive of themselves enjoying life by giving that up. You can still enjoy it. It's just, you know, your suspension of disbelief works the same way. You just imagine, oh yes, if we were on a globe, then blah. But, you know, it's...
So I assume you explained that you understand about perspective and foreshortening, and you had a little debate and they were all open to it, and you've converted them all and they're all flat earthers now, right?
Absolutely. And they'll be saying, oh, thanks for pointing that out. No, I'm joking.
No, I didn't think for a second that was the case. But what actually happened?
They have questions. And whenever my answer is, I don't know, they say, well, there you go. It's a globe. But whenever I ask them questions where their answer is, I don't know, when there's all the theory, all the history, all the astronomy on the globe, and the answer is, I don't know, they don't count that as something that undoes their model. And I've pointed this out to them. I said, you can't say that whenever I answer, I don't know, it means you're right. And whenever you answer that you don't know, it means that I'm wrong. You know,
didn't you get to the point where you had to put some rules up?
Yes. They put the rules up. We had a bet, and two of them welched on it, and they know who they are. It was to do with the gibbous moon, because what happens is people defend the globe model, even though they don't actually know the ins and outs of the globe model. So I was explaining to them, look, this moon is supposed to be way too far around the globe for us to see it. So we're seeing it, therefore we're not on this globe, and this moon is not round the globe. And they made a bet with me that I couldn't demonstrate this. And I went in there, and one of them suspected that I had something up my sleeve, which I did, which was that I was going to place the moon in a position where it was visible, which is not a gibbous position, which I did. And I said, there you go. This is how the moon must have been. And they said, no, they moved it a little bit and said, this is how it was. it's still within the crescent stage. So past the quarter moon, heading towards crescent. And that was my trick. My trick was not to place the moon in a gibbous position. It was to place it somewhere else, somewhere that seemed logical. And they fell for it. And when they realized that they'd fallen for it, they threw a fit. They just, no. And that's it. And they welched on the bet. But I forgive them.
So there was no concessions made to flat Earth. It's just deny, deny, deny. You're wrong, even if you're right.
Yes, and we have. So we made this model on the ground. There's a studio. We have space. We set everything up, and they wouldn't have it. They wouldn't accept that they don't know the model. So they didn't know the gibbous moon is beyond. It's behind the Earth. They didn't know this, so they couldn't see the trick. I knew that they didn't know this, which is how I knew I could get away with the trick, which is placing the moon somewhere visible from the front of the globe facing the sun. They didn't know this, and I said, it's because you don't know the model. And they almost froth at the mouth. How dare you say we don't know the model? We don't know the model, but how dare you say it? Say, well, freaking learn the model. Once you look at the model, you see this isn't right. This is false. It doesn't work. But,
people hate knowing stuff. I mean, I watched a show recently, I can't remember exactly which one it was, but they pointed out where there were children in a classroom being taught about the heliocentric model and specifically the moon. And one of the kids literally looked out the window and pointed out exactly what you've just said to the teacher. And the reaction was to just move on. I mean, do you think maybe flat Earth should be part of the curriculum? Should we be teaching kids about the alternatives?
I wouldn't put it past some teachers to point out that the globe Earth is a theory. And in the same way that we have the Big Bang theory, but people focus on the Big Bang part of the sentence. They forget the theory, like evolution. People talk about evolution. They don't say evolution.
You're telling me that it's not complete fact that there's a Big Bang?
Well, apparently it's just an idea.
Really? That's fascinating.
Yeah. And it's the same with evolution. People talk about evolution. They don't say the word evolution theory or theory of evolution. They're very happy to say conspiracy theory. But when it comes to something that actually has theory as part of the concept, they drop the word theory. They talk about the Big Bang and about evolution. So
what about the globe, the heliocentric model?
Yes. Well, this is what I was saying. I wouldn't put it past some teachers who are thinking, you know what, I'm not going with common purpose. I'm going to teach these kids what I think is the best thing for them to learn, or at least how to analyze the world critically. And I'm going to tell them that what I'm forced to teach them about the solar system is a theory. I've explained to them what a theory is, which is an idea, basically, for children. It's an idea that makes sense, and you look for things that make sense. Now, here's an idea about where we live, and I wouldn't put it past teachers to do that. I'd do that if I was a teacher.
Yeah, I mean, on the flip side of that, we're currently on a platform where we're presenting quite a lot of factual flat Earth information, but there's a huge amount of drama. I mean, do you think we should be keeping the drama away from the factual content that we put out on flat Earth? I mean, are the personalities getting bigger than the concept?
I think that the drama, it makes it more human. There are fallings out. People have different personalities.
Definitely.
When people accuse the flat Earth of being a cult, I'm pretty sure that inside a cult, there isn't any drama, because a controlling kingpin makes sure there's no drama. You're not allowed to fall out with your sibling, your brethren. You have to have their back. And with the flat Earth, I think the majority of people are in agreement. It's easy to see the goodness in other people. Unfortunately, some people, because of their belief system, see Satan. So they see Satan. Satan's orchestrating everything. He's doing everything. He's manipulating people. He's weaving a spell around people so that other people can't see that really they're corrupt and evil. Instead, Satan is helping them to give the illusion that they're a pacifist, lovely person, when really the reality is there isn't a Satan. If you stop to think of the concept of Satan, makes no sense whatsoever. The same as the whole Yahweh, makes no sense whatsoever. Why would Yahweh say to Abraham, I like you and your group of people, I couldn't care less about the Egyptians. In fact, you can kill the firstborn if you want. Why bother making the Egyptians in the first place? It makes no sense. So the drama that's been happening lately, I think, is a natural stage. There's going to be clashes of personality, just like in the real world. In the physical real world, where you're physically acquainted with people, there are people you get on with and people you might not. There are people who don't get on with others, but don't respond, don't react, don't show it so much. They might show it by not being quite as engaging with them as they might otherwise be. Sometimes what happens, if you are engaging with somebody whom at first you didn't quite trust, you find that your trust was a little bit molded by a former relationship you had with somebody who had similar traits. But the person now is this person is a different person, and they're just a little bit more guarded, and everybody's worthwhile. But some people do respond to their animosity. So we've had not a serious thing. In fact, I was going to start this show. I could say, "Hi, how are you? It's lovely to meet you," and be all really, really gay, so that you'd say, "Oh, what's wrong with you? Why are you using this voice?" And I could accuse you of being nasty to me. Really, just to point out that the way people are and what they do doesn't indicate that they're not a worthwhile human being. One of the reasons we're horrified when a human being does something hideously evil or hideously bad is that it's a human being doing this thing. If a human being ate a baby, we'd be horrified. If we hear that a lion ate a baby, we're horrified, but not to the same degree, because it's not a human being. So we see each other reflected. We reflect on each other. When we see a human being reacting to another human being in a way that we wouldn't react, sometimes you can say, "Hey, dude, don't react like this." But it's to them, their reaction is justified. Just like
does the information that a given personality presents affect you on a personal level?
The information, if the information is valid, we all have filters. We all have parameters that are preset by our environment. So right now, lots of people are aware that there's a gender bending depopulation program, Agenda 21. Lots of people are aware of this. So when you see somebody promoting homosexuality, you see promotion of homosexuality. If you go back in time and you think back when this event happened, this agenda was not exposed, people did not know this. This might have been the start of the rolling out, but if you put it in the framework when it was done, it's not promoting homosexuality, it's exposing hypocrisy and the absurdity of bullies behaving as bullies to mask their sexuality, which is the whole Math Powerland thing. That's what it was about.
I was about to say, that's exactly the line of the piece that Math Powerland did on the MTV show. What is it, 20 years ago now? But that's exactly the line that they were taking.
Yes, and it's obvious. It's clear to see. Now, if you look at it through the filter that we have now, which is the population and sexualization of children and infantilization of adults and the gender bending and the promotion of certain gay qualities and all kinds of stuff, you have to look at what world we want to live in. Do we want to live in a world where gay people are happy and are not assaulted? Or do we want to live in a world where it's illegal? I would rather there be gay people who are not assaulted. Now, some people, psychologists would say it's a pendulum effect. It was illegal to be gay. Now it's not only legal, but kind of promoted. You have lots of media showing a disproportionate amount, a percentile that's not actually representing the real world. Like, not everybody has gay neighbors. You know what I mean? They're showing as if the per capita of gay was higher than it actually is. So some people say this is promoting gay. It could be. It could also be the engineering of society so that people aren't offended by gayness, by homosexuality. You can look at it in different ways. You can look at it with a sinister undertone, or you can look at it with a more benevolent reason behind it. Now, there's a depopulation program that certain things are true doesn't mean that everything that's happening in society is linked to that. Because we know that the majority of the world is good. The majority of the world doesn't think, yeah, let's sterilize Africans. You know, it's a small group. And to include somebody like Matt Powland in the small group of people who are conscientiously doing something to promote an agenda, it's a little bit disingenuous. But it does add to the whole drama. It makes it all very interesting.
Well, this is it. I mean, John Le Bon pointed out that one of his videos that was about, I can't remember exactly what it was about, but a drama element of the flat earth had got double the amount of views of a factual information video. And it's unfortunate, but people love EastEnders, people love Home and Away, and that's never going to change. People love drama. And if drama's the reason that people come to a flat earth channel and do get some flat earth facts, then I'm all for that.
Yes, you know, there's a saying that great minds discuss ideas and more average minds discuss people, okay, and events. Well, every single human being has the great mind quality where they can discuss ideas. Everybody has that. And we in the flat earth world, we're engaging with the difficult to grasp concepts. How could they have woven this lie? Why? Everything. And sometimes it's good to have that respite of engaging with the lower intelligence, you know, to think, yeah, you know, and discuss the people. Now, unfortunately, on television, it's all lowest common denominator, and it's all discuss people and events, never ideas, just people and events, just that. And for us in this world, in the flat earth movement, if you want to call it that, it's a respite. We are all busy thinking, you know. And when something happens, we could be aloof and say, "Oh no, don't distract me. I haven't finished with my thought to, you know, come to the conclusion of how X, Y, and Z." We can do that if we want, but we can say, "You know what? I know where I am with that thought. I'll pick it up later. I'm going to enjoy this, and I'm just going to relax, put my feet up, and see what's happening." And I don't think it's so harmful. And the fact that so many more people were drawn to it tells me, do you know what? The human element is quite important because we are human.
Yeah, definitely. But now that the drama seems, at least for the time being, to have subsided, I'm glad to be getting back to the flat earth business that we should all be looking at on the whole anyway. And that brings me nicely to my main sort of flat earth question, which is, how does the hemispherical view of the stars disprove the globe?
Oh, when you look at astronomy, astronomers, I've had many debates with astronomers. Now, I'm not an astronomer. I don't know all of the details of astronomy. I do know certain things that astronomers themselves don't know. And some people, I assume that some people will think, you've just said you're not an astronomer, but you know certain things about astronomy that astronomers don't know. It's like, yes, it's not. I'm not some mega genius. I just happen to be interested in language. And the etymology of astronomy is that the word means star namer, not star studier. Star studying is astrology in terms of the meaning of words, the root of words. So when astronomy was set up, when theology was separated from philosophy, back in the days of the Roman Catholic power, they set up astronomy. They couldn't call it astrology because they already had astrologers. In fact, they employed astrologers. So they couldn't call it that because that's to do with a spiritual realm and ethereal qualities to life associated with the stars. Instead, they called the study of the stars, the supposed study, astronomy, which is basically just star naming. Now, when you look at the astronomy, which is the star naming, and we see now that the majority of stars are called a letter followed by a series of numbers, because we can't think of more names, okay? So when you look at what's supposed to be happening versus what is actually happening, you see that they've taken the reality of the Earth, which is flat, and said it's spherical. But because it's not spherical, they can't invent what's the other side. It's not possible for them to invent stars that don't exist, because people would say these stars don't exist. What are the coordinates? So they've taken what we have and they've said, this is what we have. These are the locations for all these stars. And you have to think that it's round and a globe. And it isn't. It's flat. It's a very clever trick.
How do the people who present us this information trick us into believing that what is actually only a hemisphere of stars above us is actually the top and bottom half of the globe? How do they convince us of this?
They convince us of this basically by separating the two, saying from this point, looking in this direction, you see these stars. From this point, the equator, looking in this direction, you see these stars. That's all it is, looking in this direction or that direction. And what they say is the difference in direction is dictated by the fact that you're on the top and on the bottom, without actually saying that instead of this being a fact, it is a theory. The theory is we're on the top and the bottom, in which case the stars are related in this spherical sense. The reality that we're on a flat plane works just as well. And people say, but how come you can't see this and how come you can't see that on the flat plane? Well, if you can't see it, you can't see it. That the globe sphere astral body says that you can't see it, which is the same as happens in the real world. It's just disregarded. And when they say, well, you can see this in the spherical model, which you wouldn't on the flat, you say, no, if you can see it, you're seeing it on the flat. And they say, well,
is there a telltale feature that they present us with when they show us, because they essentially show us two halves of a sphere when they present the star model to us? Is there a telltale feature that gives it away?
Yes. And lots of flat earthers have discussed this. This is one of the easiest things to grasp. If you come across a flat earth and you start just thinking, even without hearing this, you can arrive at this conclusion yourself, just logically. If nighttime on wherever you are on the earth is facing one direction in this spherical astral plane, then 6 months later, you're facing the other direction, the opposite direction, and 180 degrees from the original direction. So the stars you see in winter should not be the stars you see in summer. With nighttime is facing 180 degrees from each other on the heliocentric model. For any stars to repeat is a logical discrepancy. For most of the stars to repeat tells you the theory has got to be wrong. It's false. And the scientific method is to set up a theory until proven wrong. But with the heliocentric model, it has been proven wrong, but they're not dropping it. They just don't mention it. And they do this with other theories. They just don't mention that it has been proven false. Not just not confirmed, but proven false. They just don't mention it.
Sure. I was thinking more along the line of a big long tear, a rift in space that might give it away.
Yes, the Milky Way. So we have the Milky Way across the sky, and it moves across as the night wears on, and as the months go on, it's there, it's visible when it's summer nighttime and when it's winter nighttime. And that it's visible, it's telling us it's there, it's available for us to see. On the globe model, that we could see it when we're facing this way, makes sense, but that we could see it when we're facing that way, doesn't. So what people say is, well, we're inside the Milky Way, so we can't look away from it. It's like, no, wait a second. When can we look away from the center? We can look towards the center, okay. When are we facing away from that center towards the outskirts, towards the outer area? We're supposed to be on an outer arm of the Milky Way. So when can we look that way? There isn't a point in our rotation when we can look that way, because we're not on a sphere.
But to boil it down, we can never, ever look away from it.
No. And people say, it's because when in the daytime it's on the other way. Like, no, stick to the argument. If we're doing a circle, and at this point we can look that way at nighttime, then at this point we can look that way at nighttime. We can't see those things over there. But how's this working? So they develop a theory. They say, with a pole star, for instance, it comes to your eye, and to people to whom it should be impossible for them to see, the light bends. It bends, and that's how they're seeing it.
I mean, that was going to be the next question I came on to. You made a video, a really good video about Polaris and based it on the globe. I mean, before you get to breaking that down, how did you actually get to that subject in the first place?
It was actually talking with my friend Pete, and we saw Polaris. We went out to look at the stars. This is when I was first getting my head around the falsity, how the globe is, the illusion of the globe is woven. And I pointed out to him that if we can see that star, there's somebody else on the globe who can also see that star, and to them the star is in the same respect, relative orientation to us. They're looking 52 degrees north on the other side of the globe, 52 degrees north, not what, 120 degrees east. No, they're looking to the same point in the sky. And this is where the theory says one of you is seeing the actual direction where Polaris is, and the other is seeing a bent light beam. And people accept this. And you can plot it on the globe like I did, and people say, no, it's like, we could prove this. We could go to 3 different places and look at the moon and calculate which direction we're looking at and arrive at the conclusion that what I've shown on the globe says the star's here. Now, put it on a flat plane and all 3 are looking at the same point. Yes, it makes perfect sense. We're all looking at the same point. It's not so many millions of light years away. It's pretty close, just like it says in 1984. It's pretty close. It's only a few thousand miles away.
He doesn't actually say it's pretty close, though, does it? It's while he's torturing him from memory. And he basically says we have the power to make the stars close or make the stars far away. But he doesn't actually say they're close or far away, does he?
No, but he's saying we have the power to make the stars close or far away. So he's saying we can manipulate.
It's just a matter of maths.
Yeah, we can just completely manipulate where we say the stars are, and you will accept it.
I had a great long debate about this with my father, and the point he was trying to get across was that they were saying they can literally change what our reality is, and I was saying no, they do literally change our reality, but it's only a matter of maths and perception.
Yes, it's what if you consider reality to be a subjective thing, then yes, they can completely weave different realities. But if you consider reality to be an objective situation, then no, they can only warp our subjective experience of reality. When I was a child, you might have been the same. There really was a witch under my bed. There definitely was, okay? And my father could dispel that witch. Okay? In fact, just shouting him would make her no longer be there. Now, this was in my subjective reality. In the real concrete world, there was no witch there. So they do the same magic with reality, where they posit ideas in people's minds. People accept those ideas and run with them. So they accept the idea of authority and defer to it. And they do this with astronomy, with NASA, with the news, with governments, with everything.
I was going to come on to the language in just a second, but I've written down a note. I've written down the moon in 3 places, and I can't actually remember what the topic was.
Yeah.
Maybe you can help me out.
The moon in 3 places. Okay, so I made a video. When I was looking at this gibbous moon that my friends and I saw that they can't accept isn't where they thought it was, I thought, okay, how can I verify this? So I went on to Mooncalc and looked at the moon. Now, somebody from Australia mentioned that I was full of shit, completely wrong, and whatever data I was using must be just completely flawed, because the moon at the time, this is somebody from Australia telling me and my colleagues and anybody else who happened to see that moon, that we were seeing it wrong. It was over our heads, not setting to the northwest. And I said to him, how can you say this? We saw the moon. We have a photograph of it. It was not over our heads. But it made me think. He said they could see it from Australia, and they could see it because according to the globe model, Australia is here and it's nighttime, and they could see the moon over here, which was over the UK. Okay, so I thought, that's interesting. Solar system scope does the same thing. It basically molds the world into a globe and says, this is where the moon was. So I plotted the moon from the UK, from a similar latitude, which is Calgary in Canada, and Australia, and found that the three at the same time were looking at the same point in space, in real space, not in Star Wars space, at the same point. So I made this video. My friend said, you don't know how to use mooncalc. They'd never used mooncalc, but
But you've got it wrong.
Yes. So I explained to them how I used it. They were not accepting it. So I made a video saying, okay, I will show what you're claiming is the way to use it. The way they claim to use it says the moon was in 3 different locations. This is the 3 moons. Impossible moons. If you use mooncalc wrong, you end up with the moon at different locations because it's at different locations at different times. If you don't adjust the time, then you're looking at the moon over here and over there and over that way. So I showed this. That was the video.
I mean, we just touched on this a second ago, but the language we use, do you feel that it's a hindrance? I mean, we've got words like geocentric, heliocentric, and you mentioned Gaia-centric. Do these actually help us understand the globe lie or flat Earth, or are they a detriment to how we gain our understanding?
Well, if we take words, the meanings of words, the use of words as tools to relay thoughts, we have the heliocentric model, which we understand being the model that's promoted. The solar system rotates around Helios, which is the sun. And you have the Ptolemaic model, which is the geocentric model, which is that the sun and stars and moon orbit the globe Earth. Both of these, geo and helio, refer to a globe. Now there's a much older word that refers to Earth, and that word is Gaia. So if we say geocentric, we're actually talking about the globe Earth with a difference in what's conceived as being the environment. If we talk about, and I'm not endorsing that people use the word Gaia-centric or accept it just as a concept. Gaia is supposed to be the Earth. It's the spirit of the Earth. If we think that the Earth is an innate, inert thing, then we can rape it, we can puncture it, we can drill holes, we can open cast mining, we can do anything we want. It's just an object. But if we consider it as a system, just like humans are systems, we are a biological system. If we consider the Earth as being a system that's balanced in all kinds of ways, where you have winds and cooling and heating and growth and contraction and expansion, it's a system. In the old days, anything that had a system, they would give a spirit to. And the spirit of the system called Earth is called Gaia, and it's the name for the Earth. Now, the word Earth, most people know this, some people might not, but the name of where we live is Terra, T-E-R-R-A. That's the name, just like the name of our star is Sol, okay? Terra, we are terrestrial. We live on Terra. We don't say terra-centric. We could say terror-centric. It's a little bit stumbly, you know. It sounds like terror, as in war on terror, but it's the same thing as Gaia, the thing we live on. We can call it a name, and we can call it Gaia. We can refer to it as terror. It's not really that important. It's the concept that's important, and the concept is that there's a physical thing that we can address as having a name, not just an operative function like geo. And yes, language is very important. Right now we have the distortion of language where in Job, you might like this, in the story of Job, you have, it starts like this. There was a man in the land of Uz. That's how it starts, okay? Who was the greatest in the East. Now, this story says this person was the greatest in the East. Okay, no, the greatest in the East was probably the Chinese emperor. Later on it says, the sons of God went to see God. Plural, sons of God. So the word son must be referring to non-begotten sons, because Jesus is the only begotten. In which case, the word son is being wrongly used. Okay, now, to use words wrongly, in 1984, there's not just doublethink, but there's doublespeak.
Doublespeak, yeah.
Yeah. So right now, lots of us use doublespeak, where we're saying the word we're using to say what we mean is the opposite of what we mean. So when we went to a great party, people say we went to a wicked party. It was wicked. No, it wasn't wicked. Wicked is sinister, has bad intention. That's
it
what
comes from Wiccan, doesn't it?
Yes, but how it's used is to relate to evil, sinister, bad, malevolent, and we're using it to refer to something joyful, fun, nice. And this use of language it's a bad situation, because when you use the ability to actually describe something wicked as wicked, how do you describe it? If you don't have the language to describe a sinister, malevolent situation, then you can't describe a sinister, malevolent situation. Eventually, it gets to the point where you can't perceive of malevolence and sinister. You can't, it's just life, yeah. Just politicians rape people, that's just how they are, you know. And you don't make the associations. And in order for us to come to a situation where we can accept the world where there's absurd horrors being committed, we have to dissociate our language and our concepts. So we have wicked parties, and we have things are pants when they're just no good pants. And it started with the hippies. It wasn't a natural language used from the hippies. The hippies were very quickly infiltrated, and there the language was started. So something being hip and groovy, and these words, cool, these words, something isn't cool, you know, temperature's cool, but somebody or a situation or an act isn't cool. We can say, well, we use cool to mean of a cool temperament. Say, oh, okay, there's a small association there. But hip, that was a hip party. This, you know, that person is pants.
But do you think there are specific examples that, if you like, the powers that should not be, or you could even just boil it down to the people who run our dictionaries and decide which words come in and out? Do you think there are specific words in relation to flat Earth and the globe that will deceive us in the same way?
Well, yes, the way theoretical physics and theoretical physicists are considered to be scientists with high standing. They're not. They're positing ideas. The people that are actually doing the experiments are practical physicists. They're not theoretical physicists. So the theoretical physicist will think of an idea and pass it on to people who can figure out how to test whether that's true or not. Now, we never hear about those guys. We might, when you read a paper about some strange phenomenon that's been discovered, we hear about those guys, but usually it's on the coattails of the guy that conceived of it. Okay, it was verified by such and such at University of X, Y, and Z, you know, but the genius was the guy that thought of it. It's like, no, not really. The genius is the guys who figured out how to manifest it or how to develop a system to observe it. And this deference to theoretical physicists. We have the Big Bang Theory.
Well, I was going to come on to Stephen Hawking a bit later on. I mean, before we do, there's been quite a few comments that have rolled by in the feed about light and its bending. And I know this is a bone of contention in both the concave and heliocentric models. So maybe if you could give a bit more clarity on bendy light, that would be really handy.
I love this. People say light bends. Like, okay, light bends in respect to what? In respect to coming across an object that causes it to bend, because the rest of the time it's traveling straight. So when people say, but light bends, say, wait a second, light isn't a bent thing that's continuously bent. That's, you might infer that it's bending. You know, the moon is being lit on the other side of the earth because the sun is bending and reaching round. That's a theory. Okay, you can demonstrate that light bends with magnets and various different things, water, but the rest of the time it's traveling straight. Now that it bends at this junction after there's an interfering situation doesn't mean that the rest of the time that it's traveling straight, it's not traveling straight. So yes, light bends. We can see this with a pencil in a glass of water, but the rest of the time it travels straight. And concave earthers say, no, 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 it's bending continuously. They'll give over. You know, it can be demonstrated that it isn't, but they say, no, everything is bent. Your laser, your line of sight, the instruments, everything. They'll give over with your faith. But
yeah, that's it. It requires the same degree of faith as the globe model. And as you rightly point out, we can see it bend because we know it's straight.
Yes. And people forget that. People say, but light bends. It's like, okay, carry on with that thought. Look at it. Don't just focus on the bending bit. Look at light. Use a laser. Look at a laser. Is it bent or is it straight? And when you use something to bend it, does it bend? Yes. But is it straight the rest of the time? So you can't just take a convenient part of an idea and say, there you go, that's convenient and that's it. I'm happy with that. Just like with the globe, people say, I'm happy with the flights from the UK to Australia taking forever because it's so far away. They don't start to think, maybe if they made it a straight flight, people would say, hold on, we can't be so far away. We can't be on the other side of the globe. So they don't. They make a long journey. There you go. Simple. Just make it several different stops with loads of layover, long periods between them. People lose track of time. Make the journey a circular journey and say, there you go, it took forever to get there because it's so far away. Well, you know, they have to do that. How?
On the one hand, when you hear that verbalized, what I might immediately think is, this is nonsense. Why would any travel agent or airline use up that amount of fuel? But then I think about the international travel I've done, and it is exactly like that. You stop places and they'll ferry you off the plane just to ferry you back on again with no extra passengers and then take off again. And you think, what are we doing here? Why are we here? And you don't give it, or at least at the time, I didn't give it a massive amount of thought. But then when people lay it out for you, like you say with the layovers and such, you think, God, yeah, that does actually happen.
You're very well traveled, aren't you?
I wouldn't say well traveled. I used to be an international rep, so I traveled all over the world.
So yeah, well traveled. Okay, not in terms of tourism and experiencing other cultures, but in terms of actual physical travel. You've traveled a lot.
Yeah, I've been around.
Yeah, so you can see how if, let's say, for people who are on neither side, neither flat nor globe, okay? Let's imagine that there's an agency, a group that would like the world to think that we're on a globe for whatever reasons. They could be anti-religious reasons, they could be financial reasons, okay? Would these people organize things to support what they're saying, or would they leave it to chance? Well, chances are, if they're powerful enough to inculcate such an idea, they're likely to stay in powerful situations. We know that powerful families remain powerful. They stay in those positions. Could these families organize it so that aviation agencies have to stick to certain rules? Of course they could. All they have to do is set the order, and that's it. Now, it's only sometimes when people, when things break the mold, like the fact that radar stops tracking flights across the southern oceans, which makes no sense. You think that that's when they would be the most highlighted in case they go down, but no, it goes off, and you think, what? This doesn't make sense in that this happens in the real world doesn't make sense. On the globe, it would be very easy to keep track of them, but on the flat plane, it's not so easy, and that's why it drops. They can't show flights going across. The distance between the antennas that triangulate location is too great. So they say, oh, they just switched the transponders off. What the hell are they switching transponders off for? They could veer off and attack a country, couldn't they? They could just say, right, transponder off, let's go and crash into the Eiffel Tower. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing before we move off the topic of words was, last time we spoke on the phone, we were talking about how there's sometimes not an actual word. And I think the example we got to was zeitgeist.
Yes. Yeah. So my mother tongue is Spanish and Catalan. I have two mother tongues. And when I went from Spain to the UK, I had to learn English. And I realized that there are terms in English for which there isn't an equivalent in Spanish, and there are terms in Spanish for which there isn't an equivalent in English. Now, this is how you can have instructions for your equipment, electrical equipment, where the English instructions are a page and the Spanish are 4 pages. It's because there are concepts that you can relate using English language that you can't in Spanish, so each concept has to be explained in Spanish. And it happens vice versa. You have a lot of romantic qualities in poetry. There are qualities from the Spanish language for which there isn't a British equivalent, and British people, to portray that, have to use lots of words. But in terms of practicality, English is a much more functional language. Now, when you look at what is lost in translation and what's available through language, the concepts that are available through language, this is going back to Orwellian loss of grasping of concepts. If you destroy the language, if you remove terms from the dictionary, if you remove them from society, eventually the concepts associated with those terms are also removed. So it's important that we pay attention to the word theory, not just linked to conspiracy, but to globe theory, heliocentric theory, Big Bang theory, theory of evolution, theory, the concept of theory, which is something that might be the case and might not. It's an idea. And unless we understand that the word theory means a belief, something that seems to be the case, it might not be. We can find something out later that disproves this. Like Einstein's model of the universe did away with the ether. At the same time, Tesla was working with the ether. And there were scientists proving that the ether exists. Now, it made its way back on to theoretical physics as dark matter. It just, qualities that ether has were kind of separated and said, okay, we'll call it this here. We'll call it the strong force. We'll call it the color force. They have words for things that are already part of the definition of ether. And at the time, Tesla explained that physicists were veering off into the world of mathematics and ever distant from the real world. And he was right. He was working in the real world, demonstrating stuff through practical experiments. And Einstein was reducing everything to zero and starting from zero. So Big Bang and all these things. Well, this is a theory. You end up with a theory. You can delete things like the ether. You can say these qualities that belong to the ether, that are caused by the ether, are actually caused by this other thing. And
then you end up with dark energy and all sorts of
cosmic rays, all kinds of stuff. And if people stop being able to conceptualize of the word theory as having a true meaning, and they start like the way it's now associated with conspiracy theory, what that actually means is suspicion. You know, a conspiracy theorist is somebody who suspects that something has gone on, and they think maybe this and maybe that. Okay, that conspiracies happen. Yes, that's true. We know they happen. We know that companies use conspiracies. They're not going to tell you exactly how much it costs to do something, because then you might demand to pay that. They're going to, just not mention it. It's how the world right now works. Conspiracy, silence, not exposing things. That's how the world works. We don't know how much water actually costs for us to, bathe in. We just pay whatever we're told. But there's a real price there, but that's not what we pay. That price would pay for, the employees, everything used. But a big chunk of it that we actually pay goes to shareholders, goes to the owners of the companies. And this is
some underlying sympathy from astronomers. I mean, maybe people like Patrick Moore, rest his soul.
Okay. I saw a documentary recently, a Patrick Moore documentary. It was filmed in the 1950s, I believe. And just to go back to language, the language used by people in that documentary was so advanced compared to the language we're using right now. They were much more succinct and concise and precise. We're losing the ability to communicate very clearly the way that they could communicate. Now, Patrick Moore, in this documentary, he explains the flat Earth. He discusses other people's beliefs. He interviews people who back then were saying that the sun isn't an object very distant, sending heat through space. It's brilliant. It's a very good documentary. Now, I don't know whether astronomers will publicly come out and say, you know what, we've realized that we've been looking at something quite close. We've been warping our telescopes in order to see this because it's quite close. And triangulation alone tells us how far away they are. We've been reading data coming, energy with radio telescopes. We've been reading the energy coming and extrapolating that it means hydrogen at that distance and helium at this other distance, when really we've ascribed these qualities. What's being received is a range, and we've assumed that the range means distance and element, when really the range is just describing the type of energy that's creating the light. And now you have physicists who are saying there's a series of plasma agglomerations of Tesla waves that are coalescing and resulting in a point of light from the Earth. But if you were to go up and look sideways, like if you went up to a rainbow, we can see a rainbow in the sky. If you could quickly get on a paraglider and fly around to the side, you wouldn't see the edge of the rainbow. So they're saying the same thing. They're saying we're seeing stars from our indexical point of view from the Earth. But if you were to rise and look sideways, you don't see anything. It's an agglomeration of energies that end up being light. They are already explaining these things. There are physicists already explaining that the sun's effect on the Earth is not this wave traveling through space. They're referring to Tesla rays, to the subatomic world, to things which are basically dissociating from the theory. I think in the future, people are going to understand the world that eventually, through some, it will be a bit difficult for people to let go of the globe, for the powers that be to admit to having been misled. They won't admit to lying and
well, this branches quite nicely into the next subject I was going to bring up, which is the psychology of flat Earth. I mean, how do you perceive the current psychology of flat Earth and its understandings and its realization, if you like?
Well, I see this. The first people, Matt Powerland was the first guy. So he comes across it, he rolls it out, and he's been thinking about it and noticing things. First as a lone wolf, pretty much, and now lots of other people. And because of his bent of mind, he's seeing qualities that might or might not be there. The rest of us, we're looking at this, and it's like we're on a wave. We're seeing things, we're going through stages. Somebody comes out with a new proof, proving that the world is flat or utterly demolishing the globe, and we think, aha, brilliant, and we enjoy somebody else having dedicated their mind and their time to thinking and putting something together to relate the information. And we're in a series of highs and lows. And in the lows, we have drama, not just the lows in terms of information. Some good information came out from Jeranism regarding the Antarctic trips. That's
I said that was a big plus from Jeranism as a result of all the drama.
Yes, that was brilliant. In terms of the we flat earthers and our psychology and our approach to the world, I think we're forced to have to contend with the propaganda that we see is affecting all the globalists. We see how they have the model reinforced continuously. We see this. We see when people sucked into believing that a false flag is as it's portrayed. We see this very clearly, and we're not separate from it. We can see it, but we can see very clearly that the tendency we have to want to tell other people is, we all know, everybody who understands the flat earth, who knows that we're living on a flat world, understands why we do it. We understand that it's basically, it's love, it's a sense. I described it yesterday. It's almost a tribal sense, not a cult sense. It's almost like
it's love. Is that what you just said?
Yes, it's love. It's saying, hey, you're a being having this same experience on this world. You're here too. What the heck? You know, look at this. We've had this ridiculous, absurd thing pushed on us. We can see through it. All these other people are still believing that and are still lost, and half of them thinking there's no creator, or whatever created us is some multi-dimensional, whatever they think. And we're seeing things clearly, thinking, wow, no Big Bang means definite creator, not a biblical creator. I have no, I don't want to be disrespectful, but I think that the Bible is a load of lies. So I think the Bible is basically people making sense of the world and explaining what they believed at the time. At the same time, you have the Mahabharat in India explaining, you know, a disc on the back of 4 elephants which are on a tortoise traveling through space. People were making sense of the world. It's going into writings, then people made religions out of it, inventing gods. We have all gods, all times, all gods have been invented. The underlying factor to all the religions is that goodness is better than not goodness, that cooperation makes things run better, and that we're here and there's something that is involved with getting us here and creating everything for us to be in. And as flat earthers, we understand, it's inevitable, it's an inevitable conclusion. There's no thinking the world is flat and I'm here and there must be some mechanistic system that doesn't require any kind of creator.
Well, do you think the British public, as we're in Britain, are more or less gullible to the propaganda that's out there, or are we becoming more skeptical?
I think my thoughts on this are that because Britain is so heavily controlled, we've got used to living in a very heavily controlled society. We've got used to it. We don't flag up as anti-revolutionary or as revolutionary as things that will cause trouble. We don't mean to cause trouble. We know that systems are in place basically to stop people from running around the streets with machetes. So nobody wants to overthrow the royal family, get rid of the government, have complete anarchy where the strongest and most influential will regress back to a feudal time. Nobody wants that. And as conscientious human beings, we don't want other people to want that either. We want there to be no corruption, no pedophilia, none of the bad stuff, of course. But the way the world is reinforced, the globe is reinforced to globally minded people, is transparent. And we try to explain this to them. Those who are receptive, and those who aren't basically aren't ready for it. I think sometimes it's like, let's suppose we were going on holiday and it was going to be a great holiday. The first person to wake up is all excited. They go to the second person who hasn't woken up. They get a wet cloth and throw it on their face. Even though they're waking them up so that they can enjoy the fact that they're going on holiday, the act of throwing a wet cloth on their face, they're not going to wake up happy. So I think we should let people wake up in a more gentle way. That's my thoughts. I kind of lost the thread of what you asked, by the way.
Well, in that case, I'll change the subject. I mean, the Yule thing, again, we talked about this on the phone. Do you think the way our, not necessarily calendars, but our holidays and celebrations tie up, are they part of the programming for the Globe Lie, or do they tie into Flat Earth?
It depends how, what parameters you see the world through. If you look at historically, you had humans in Britain before Christianity existed, and they had celebrations. All northern cold regions had celebrations, all of them. And it makes sense if you look at a sociological meaning behind them. It makes sense. If you have a small tribe that's nomadic, you need to meet other small tribes. Otherwise, eventually you will have inbreeding. So you need to basically join other tribes. So in Native America, they would have winter ceremonies where lots of tribes would gather basically for the youth to meet each other. They would swap, they would join each other's tribes. This happened all the time. In cold countries like the UK, we had Yuletide, which had nothing to do with Christianity. It had to do with nature. Nature gives us things. It provides everything we have. So you have a Yule that provides happiness. You know, it could be food, it could be crafted toys, it could be whatever it was, but we were basically revering the fact that nature provides everything. That was what Yuletide was. We have the same ceremony in the middle of winter. Well, in the middle of winter, on the 25th of December, which is unrelated to the actual New Year, whether you want to go from the solar New Year, which is the 22nd, or the organic New Year, which is spring, like you were saying. We have this celebration in the winter, which religion says is Christian, that other faiths have the same stage, the same era, in the same stage in the year that are not Christian. We kind of dismiss those things in the same way that we dismiss the fact that the Chinese have a completely different calendar. We know they have a different calendar, we just completely dismiss it. The Jews have a completely different calendar. We dismiss it. We think our calendar is the one, they use our calendar, therefore our calendar is the one. No, all that they're doing is they're using their calendar at the same time as us. We receive something in August, they might be sending it in Dragon Month. We don't know, you know. But the closed-minded view of the world, if we think winter ceremonies are to do with Christianity and the elements that have been there all along, so the love for each other, the cherishing, the demonstrating of gratitude, that's there through all of them. Those are the things that are valid. You can say Christianity, Judaism, Islam, whatever you want, but the qualities are the same. And I don't think that religion has that much an impact on the physical reality. We have the hypothetical monthly Gregorian calendar, which comes from Christianity, but that's just what we happen to have. The Chinese have a completely different one, and their world works just as well.
So again, I think it more boils down to the language. I read about 12 months ago that there was a bit of a resurgence in British schools of Latin. Do you think if that picks up and goes ahead a bit further, do you think that would help people in a better understanding of where we live?
Yes, I absolutely agree with that. Going back to this Patrick Moore documentary, it was in the 1950s. Most people who went to school in the 1950s studied Latin. It was part of their studies. Everybody studied Latin. Everybody studied philosophy. Philosophy was dropped, and not long after, Latin was dropped. And when you have Latin, you understand how concepts are based on the language you use to portray them. We know that the Roman used language to explain their world. We know we use different language. We can see our association with that language, although we also have so many associations with the Germanic languages. But to see the root of things, if people understand Latin, then they understand that there's a similar thing going on with Greek. So you have astronomy, and you think, okay, it's easy to see. I think the schools that are starting to teach Latin will advance very quickly. The people who learn Latin are more well-rounded in terms of evaluating the world. You have people who work 9 to 5 in very straight jobs, who are fully aware of all the stuff that's done to manipulate the world, but their grounding lets them not be disturbed by this, lets them pull ahead, continue. And you have people who don't have that well-rounded personality due to lack of education, lack of accessibility to concepts, who are basically buffeted continuously. And the majority of the working class in the UK are these people. They are buffeted by the government.
I know we've covered this already, but I want to keep this very much flat earth, having had so much drama in the last couple of weeks. But can you kind of, in a roundabout way, explain how the heliocentric model is presented with maths and abstract images rather than real proof?
Yes. Okay. So if you have a situation where you're trying to demonstrate something which is at odds with the real world, the physical world, you must weave a system to endorse that, such as theoretical physics and mathematics, and say, these things prove what we're telling you. Never mind the real world. These things prove what we're telling you. So the flat earth are saying, dude, the real world is the truth. Your theory is just something you made up. Without the theory to support the globe, people will very quickly say, no, you're talking shit. You don't know what you're talking. Who are you? What are you doing? Just go away. You know, don't be so daft. Look at that over there. You know, so
well, when you say look, what's interesting is you kind of pointed this way and then you pointed that way. And it's almost like if you point this way, referencing flat earth, you're looking out, in my case, a window. And when you look this way, you're looking at a newspaper or a television or the internet. It's back to 1984, basically, isn't it?
Yes. People, okay, I understand how people who have a weak association with the world in terms of how they communicate with each other, their place in society, their sense of identity, if they're very good at maths and at a young age, they get a pat on the back and awarded for being good at maths, then you understand they love maths. They get into it more, so they become better at it. They exercise the logical part of the brain, and brilliant. They can end up describing things that are absolutely marvelous, but they're just inventions. They're not things that are physical. They're not engineers. Engineers who are very good at maths, and then are also very good with mechanical things. They can get a pat on the back. They love that, and they make real physical inventions. But the two aren't joined at the hip. You have the theoretical physicists. When I referred to the Big Bang Theory, I was referring before to the TV show. You have these people who are socially inadequate people, but they're all heroes. You know, you have Sheldon, who has an autism spectrum disorder and is very, very cerebral. Like, great. If theoretical physics didn't exist, he would be called the village idiot. That's how he would be referred to. Now, it's good that we don't refer to people as village idiots, but we shouldn't refer to them as geniuses. There's a flipping of common sense when you look into the globe Earth, where things that are absurd, like massive wealth and celebrity, are valued. Like, wow, how about we value really good people instead? People who do really nice things. You never hear about these unless they happen to be a celebrity who does something really nice. But there are selfless people in Britain right now. There are people who none of us know about who work with the homeless. They have a normal job, and then they spend a lot of their energy working to make sure that as many homeless people get food as they can, that as many of them find shelter or manage to get back onto the net of society and have a flat and pay their bills. There are lots of people like that who do it for free. I'm not talking about social workers. I'm talking about people who set up organizations, go through all of the hassle of setting up charities or non-for-profit organizations so that they can do this just to help other people. We never hear about these. We never hear about them. We hear about celebrities, and we hear about very wealthy people. So we're
speaking of somebody we don't often hear about. I was going to come on to this next, which was about Tesla. I mean, what bearing does Tesla, and if you like, from the opposing point of view, Einstein, have on flat Earth?
Tesla said that when humanity recognizes how the wheels of nature work, they will have abundant energy. Okay, so he didn't say how the spheres of nature work. He said how the wheels of nature work. Okay, so I don't know. Was he indicating that he thought the world was flat? He was certainly very religious. His parents were very religious. His father was very religious. It's not really important. His discoveries were true, were real, were functional, and we have them now. Lots of it was sequestered by the FBI when he passed away. This was before they were called the FBI. It was sequestered because it could be dangerous to national security, which means individual massive wealth, not the security of a nation. But his understanding of the world was much more direct in terms of the energies acting on it. Einstein's understanding of the world was more to do with the theories explaining what might be happening. And the difference between the two is that Einstein is lauded as a genius, even though E = mc squared has been disproven. So, yes, lauded as a genius, whereas a lot of people, if it wasn't for conspiracy theorists, lots of people who know about Nikola Tesla wouldn't know about him, even though the unit used to measure magnetism is called the Tesla. So, you know, we have ohms and we will have watts, and they're Tesla, you know. We had him very briefly mentioned in physics at school, but nothing further, not much. The merits that the man should have received went elsewhere. The radio went to Marconi, even though Marconi worked for him and stole his patent, and Tesla had already registered it with the patents office. but Marconi was willing to use it, whereas Tesla wasn't, because he could see the military applications. It's like, here's a good guy who didn't quite care for money, as long as he had enough to continue with what he wanted to do, which was bring energy freedom to the world. He was happy. So he died penniless. Well, he died penniless, but being continuously housed at the Waldorf Hotel in New York for free, because the people who owned the hotel understood who he was. But he didn't get the fame and adulation that Einstein got. So here's a guy describing the real world. Let's say he represents flat earthers, and Einstein represents the globe. The guy that represents the flat earthers comes out with concrete proofs and demonstrations and experiments and inventions, and the other guy comes out with maths. And we have adulation for the maths, not for the guy that made Wi-Fi possible.
Well, he was featured recently, or I say recently, it was probably about 5 or 6 years ago now, but in a movie called The Prestige, where the media just painted Tesla as a magician, if you like. And do you know who played him in that film?
No.
David Bowie.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Prestige it's called.
I'm going to watch this. Wow, I'm jotting this down. The Prestige or Prestige?
Prestige. So it's the Prestige is the part of a magic trick that you reveal the grand finale, if you like. And the plot of the film, without, will I spoil the film? Oh, who cares? Basically, the Tesla character creates a magic trick where he can basically, like in The Fly, where he can transport stuff, but the trick fails, and instead of actually transporting it, it replicates. So you end up with a copy rather than a transported item. You end up with a copy of that item in a different place. So you end up with two. But that was the basic plot of the movie. But like I say, yeah, David Bowie plays that character.
I'm going to download this as soon as I get off with you. I'm going to download this and watch it. Brilliant. You know,
I know we stay on the same subject though with Einstein. We've got some new stuff coming out in science at the moment, which again we talked about a couple of days ago, which is grey holes.
Yes. So there's a self-taught physicist and visionary and mystic called Nassim Haramein, a very intelligent guy who, if it wasn't that he's good at explaining things, he might be described as an idiot savant, like the guy in The Rain Man, the film with, yeah. But he happens to, part of his genius is in taking very complex ideas and figuring out how to relate them to other minds. What usually happens with people who have high genius is they lack interpersonal skills, or they lack the ability to see that other people's minds aren't quite as sharp as theirs and can't grasp what they're explaining. So one of what makes Nassim Haramein really good is that he has this ability to explain things so that dipshits like me can understand it. So he's explaining things about physics, about the energies involved with reality. Now what he's doing is he's explaining how to arrive at a free energy device. He has one, okay, but he can't. It's not. It doesn't want to get shot in the street. So he's explaining physics. He's filling the gaps in physics. So in the book Gravitation, you have a definition of the book explaining that all laws described are correct and exact for any isolated system. So light works exactly like this, and gravity works exactly like this, but as isolated systems. And what Nassim Haramein is explaining is that to isolate the systems and describe them as isolated things, there's a loss, because light is not isolated from space or from time or from other events, environment. Nothing is isolated. So what he's explaining is there's a way of understanding the world that doesn't involve isolating things and loosing. So gravity, you can describe it as theoretical gravity, or you can describe it as heaviness and density. Okay, density, for the theory of gravity, you need to avoid things like spin, or invert the effects of spin, which is what gravity actually does. The faster you spin, the more gravity pushes on you by some quirk of nature, so that you don't end up flying off the equator, but you're not heavier on the North and South Pole. So everything is tweaked to reflect the real world. But with Nassim Haramein, everything reflects the actual real world without tweaking, because everything is bound to everything else. So he explained that the source of atoms, for instance, is an energy, and this energy is functions in such a way as to result in physicality from our point of view. But from a microscopic level, you have an energy vortex, which is black from the inside, which is what, you know, microscopes look at, and they see this ghost matter in the center. But from the outside, it sends light out. It can be identified because it sends out energy. And he explains this is what the sun is. This is his idea. The sun is this thing. So black holes aren't this sucking thing that Stephen Hawking defined them as. They are a transformational thing. They are a feedback in reality. So energy goes in and comes out continuously. Okay, the same with atoms, the same with anything physical. This is when we're talking about atoms and things that are theoretical, like possible black holes in space. But in terms of physicality, atoms have this quality. So they are black holes. According to Nassim Haramein, they are black holes, but the word whole is spelt with a W, as in entirety. Black holes. When he first came out with this, Einstein rebuked him and said, this is what happens when somebody who's not classically trained in academic physics thinks things, okay? But 15 years later, he updated his theory on black holes. In A Brief History of Time, he does explain that the difference between information and data in regards to black holes, there's a distinction. So you can have data sucked into the black hole, but information, perhaps in the form of radiation, this is what he explains, could be repelled, okay? But it was unverified. Nassim Haramein has said, no, look, this is how you can understand it in very simple terms. And Stephen Hawking said, no, you're talking nonsense, and then updated his system so that black holes are now grey holes because they are white from the outside and black from the inside. And it's just, what can you say? You have a self-taught guy who figures stuff out, explains it. You have banks of physicists saying that he's talking rubbish and eventually modulating their physics to incorporate his discoveries. And it's brilliant because he isn't just a theoretical physicist. He makes practical applications. And yeah, so there's a black hole, grey hole.
Well, there's also in the Big Bang expanding universe theory, seems to be a contradiction if there's an equal and opposite reaction to everything.
Yes, this is one of the things Nassim Haramein points out, that in this explanation of physics where laws can be written for isolated elements, you can have a Big Bang. It's isolated from time, it's isolated from certain qualities. All of the rules of physics start at the Big Bang. You can do this, it's just mathematics. You can just refuse to acknowledge other things like logic or plausibility or reality. But Nassim Haramein, his version of the world, he is a globalist. His version of the world is that if there's any kind of Big Bang, it's not something that spontaneously existed, because that's impossible. You can't have nothingness and energy just spontaneously existing and forming itself into all of the different things that we have in the universe and expanding into a place that wasn't available for it to expand into. So it falls apart, the Big Bang Theory. What his idea is that everything is just a feedback loop. Everything has been there continuously forever. And I suspect that he might be very slowly saying, opening doors for people to realize that we live in a flat world, that energy functions like this, but he's using the language that won't alienate him with the academic world. If he said the world is flat and this is how energy works, they would say, get away. We're not going to pay attention to you. But he's very clever.
I mean, you've got things like free energy, which seem like the impossible, but yet the devices like this exist in places like Google. I mean, do you think free energy is a key to opening up people's minds to the world of what seems like the impossible, if you want to bracket flat Earth in that?
Yes. The Google energy harnessing units are fascinating. I urge anybody to go and look at this. It was an American inventor, brilliant, just getting the energy from the air, just cool. But yes, I think when people have believed that you can't get energy from nothing, which is true, and they assume that because they can't see a link between their physics and the source of energy, that the source of energy equals nothingness. Okay, so it's a logical conclusion. You can't get energy from nothing. That's true. If you understand that there isn't such a thing as nothing, that there are other mechanisms involved in the universe, in reality, that you don't understand. And if you read Tesla and you see that he's explaining that all you need is to find a way to resonate with whatever energy you happen to want to tap into, then you will focus on resonating either with the ether, with thermodynamics, with light, with a variety of things that are there that we've never considered as real usable forms of energy, and transforming it into electricity and then everything else. So, and that's just with electricity. We also have the water engine, the Stanley Myers inventions, and Paul Pantone. People forget about Paul Pantone, who was one of Stanley Myers' students, who basically worked on Stanley Myers' invention. Stanley Myers' cell made hydrogen from water by running a weak electrical pulse through it, splitting the hydrogen from the oxygen, and hydrogen is combustible, so it could be used in combustion engines. Paul Pantone tweaked this model so that it wouldn't have to be water. It could be milk or juice or anything liquid that contains hydrogen. Most liquid things contain hydrogen, especially things that we have available to us. So he could release the hydrogen in any liquid. But if you look at it, and he's still around, the guy is still alive. If you look at the history of what happened to him when he tried to bring this to the world, you'll see the dark forces at work, and it's very severe. I urge anybody to look into it. Paul Pantone, spelt the way it sounds. Yeah, there's energy, abundant, free, accessible, and hidden. We can see why it's hidden. If your family's wealth comes from petrol, do you want to no longer have that wealth, or do you want other people to have the same wealth? Yours will diminish and theirs will increase. If you think that your sense of importance comes from your wealth, you won't do this. In the same way that people who think that their sense of importance comes from being able to grasp the globe, they won't want to say goodbye to it. There's to bring it straight back to the flat Earth. People that understand the flat Earth understand that we all have everything has significance. We have significance not just by being mere merit by the fact that we're here. We have importance in a feedback way. We affect our environment, we affect other people affect us. And everybody is significant. When you understand that everybody is significant, you don't want to have more than somebody else. You want to make sure everybody else is okay too. But if your sense of significance comes from you having more, then you want to stay having more. You don't want other people to have more because you fear that your sense of having significance will diminish. And this isn't true. It's an illusion. It's basically it's a psychological illness that the West has, where celebrity and wealth are synonymous with each other, and they are to be adored and cherished. That's the Native Americans saw this in the white mind, that we were sick, that the West, when you consider what happened to the Native Americans, I know this sounds like a tangent, but what happened to the Native Americans was they were completely decimated in the most hideous ways by Christians. This is what happened. Christians killed them because they weren't Christians. So you can see how the Native American view of Western men, or well, to them it's Eastern, but to white men, to Europeans, is that they're sick. Because it's obvious, if a tribe comes to your land, or if a group of people comes to your land and starts killing everyone for not being like them, you very quickly see that there's something wrong with them, that they're sick. And we don't tend to see ourselves as the ones that are sick. And I don't mean ourselves as a flat earthers, I mean the globalists. No, but I mean, in general, we don't see that we could be part of the sickness. You have people who adhere to the global warming model who say all humans are part of this sickness killing the earth. Like, not true.
I think you summed it up nicely when you said about the significance, and I wasn't actually going to bring this up, but I will. Top10s.net, which is a British guy who just does top 10 lists, recently did a very sarcastic look at top 10 reasons to believe in the flat earth. And I think his number one reason was because it makes you feel special, or people who believe in flat earth think they're special. And it kind of made me think, well, the heliocentric model is the absolute opposite of that. In other words, you are totally insignificant in the heliocentric model, and we are significant in the flat earth model.
Yes, people can rationalize their point of view. So this top 10, people like to believe or delude themselves into thinking that the world is flat because they find a sense of significance. No, I had a sense of significance before then. Now that sense of significance is grounded.
Exactly.
Lots of us feel this way. It's grounded. Whatever he sees as giving his life significance, it's completely valid to him. Now, if we say that he sees his criticism of subjects as something from which he derives significance, we're right. He can disagree with it, but yeah, it's true. But the only reason people think the world is flat is because they get a sense of significance from it is false. He can't understand it because he isn't a flat earther, and it doesn't mean that he's inferior because he isn't a flat earther. This is part of the thing that they can't understand. They can't place themselves on a flat plane and understand the sense of significance that everything and everybody has. They can't. In the West, what makes you significant is being different, separate, and superior in some way or other. The world champion, the best at. And instead of just seeing that you have you're born with significance. Significance is inherent in you. You can do what you want with it, but it's there. Now, people will say they derive significance from their belief in Christ or in any religion, and that's fine if they want to rest their significance on that. But if you understand that your significance is an ipso facto fact, in fact, with language, there's a lovely, I like this trick. The word matter, does something matter? Physicality is matter. You are matter. You matter. Okay? You are physicality. There's no denying it. When people say, oh, so you now believe in God, I like to tell them, well, my conclusion is whatever it is that created everything must be electric or have electricity to it, resonance, an ability to cause things through energy. And that energy, we can call it electricity. Some people could call it lightning, but you very quickly discover that lightning is electric. So if you're asking me, do I believe in electricity? My answer is yes, I do. And physicality and matter is something that we have on this world. If you want to extrapolate from matter to significance, to value, to possessions, to superiority, then go for it. It doesn't make you more significant. It doesn't make you less. It just makes your experience of the world a little bit unfortunate. But that's all.
I've got a couple more questions for you, Antonio, then we'll wrap things up maybe in about 5-10 minutes time, if that's okay with you. My first question is based on the fact that we've tackled some pretty heavy topics in this little conversation. And as more and more people wake up to flat Earth, do you feel that a lack of heliocentric knowledge will be a detriment to people as they come into the flat Earth movement?
A lack of heliocentric knowledge as a
so when you probably chat with people all the time, like your work colleagues, and you have got good knowledge of the heliocentric model, therefore you can disprove it or challenge it. Whereas as more people wake up to flat Earth and possibly just watch flat Earth videos, they may have very limited understanding of how the actual globe works and therefore have little armor or little weapons to combat it.
Yes, I've got you now. I shouldn't think so. I can see how that makes sense, but I think what's more likely to happen is, as they look into it, they will learn what the heliocentric model was from people criticizing it, from people unpicking it. They will learn and say, oh yes, so the moon's supposed to be here, so we're supposed to be at the other side of the orbit, so the sun is corkscrewing its way through space. So, and they will learn more about the model that they've assumed might have been reality by looking at people who know that it isn't and are pointing out all the flaws. So I shouldn't think that the fact that they can't themselves debunk their own model because they don't understand it well enough to see the discrepancies is something that works against us. I think what will happen is lots of people will derive at least a modicum of education, a modicum of knowledge from people who do understand the model and debunk it very easily, like Jeranism, like everybody, you know. Anybody who debunks the globe and then extrapolates and proves the flatness. So you debunk the globe and then you prove the lack of curve. And you have people say, you haven't proven it's flat. Like, well, we've proven it's not a globe. Now we're proving it's flat.
You led me quite nicely, Antonio, onto my final question, which is, can you explain a little bit about the skeptical argument and hopefully how that links back into simulation theory and more specifically, the Mandela effect?
Yes, you love the Mandela effect, don't you?
No, I don't.
Well, I remember you telling me you absolutely loved it. It was last week and I was, no, I'm joking.
I just couldn't know what you were doing there.
The Matrix, the film The Matrix, which is it's a very good film, and
simulation, absolutely love it.
Yeah, and simulation theory, digital universe, they are in essence the same thing. The details, you know, whether you're plugged in and you're serving as a battery or whether you're just a meme who thinks it has an identity as it travels through a hypothetical digital world or a video game, it's still the same philosophical argument. And these are a retelling of a very simple philosophical argument. I think, you know, when you talked about Latin, do I think Latin will improve things? And I said, sure. Yes, I think philosophy will do the same, because in philosophy, you have simple arguments that express something valid about the world. If it's invalid, you can understand that it's invalid. So you can use something invalid in order to prove lack of validity. But in terms of looking at the world and deriving knowledge, which is what philosophy is, you have the skeptical argument. It's called the skeptical argument. It has various different formats, okay? It could be, originally, it was a genie who is playing with illusions, okay? This evolved into a scientist who has a brain hooked up and he's creating impulses in that brain, causing the brain to believe that it's a series of personalities living a life. Okay, and now we have the matrix, and we have digital theory. What's it called?
Simulation theory.
Simulation theory. The same thing. Okay, all of them say you might not be real. This might all be an illusion, which is the skeptical argument in philosophy is a good argument. Okay, not by way of disproving the world, but by way of looking. If you say, okay, let's assume that we might not all be real, but we're looking at the parameters of the world that we're in. Okay, what things can we do to test the parameters of the world that we're in? Given that we might be in a hypothetical world, in God's dream, in a laboratory, whatever. So as long as the parameters, as long as the investigations you conduct reinforce, prove validity and prove truth, they're valid. Now, the idea that the only thing we have is the skeptical argument, and that you cannot prove anything whatsoever because we're in a skeptical argument scenario, in a simulation theory, it falls down because in the simulation theory itself, so everything is not real and everything is not real. So in the simulation, we have the skeptical argument, which says what you think is how you live might not be how it is. You might not be a simulation. You might be an organic body walking around. Okay, so the simulation theory, game theory, the dome theory, Mark Sargent's theory, it has value, absolutely. And when you look into physics, into microscopes, and it looks like matter becomes ghost matter and hard to identify, it looks like there's a matrix. Like, yeah, that's our brains looking at things we don't understand. Who knows? We might be.
How does this get manipulated in such a way to convince people that their misapprehension about a movie title or their lack of information about Nelson Mandela's death turns into being in a simulation?
Well, with the skeptical argument or the simulation theory, things can be tweaked. In the Matrix has a glitch. Whenever something is shifted, or in the film Dark World, whenever things are shifted, there's a glitch. And people are saying the Mandela effect is a glitch, is indicative of a glitch. Like, fair enough. If that's what you see, then that's what it is to you. There are people in tribes who go out and look for bananas and eat bananas. I don't suspect that they're having some Mandela effect. It seems to be, if you're very engaged with the internet and with things that are easy to manipulate,
yeah,
you can come to the conclusion that there are glitches in the matrix. We all have phenomena that we can't explain. You might see a dark shape, you might see a light where in a corner of a room where there's no light. Psychologists can say that these are synapses misfiring in the visual cortex. There's explanations for things. To say it's demonstrable of a simulation, sure, if you happen to want to look at it that way, then fine.
But you say look at it that way. I mean, I like to boil it down to flat Earth, because once you are woken up to such a monumental difference in your world, you're suddenly in a position where you can feel like the Earth itself has actually changed shape. Therefore, dropping this little nugget of manipulation into the media on the internet, or however the meme gets out there, is quite clever because it's been linked into flat Earth now. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, and it's interesting. You can look at it with fun and say, well, hey, wow. But I said this yesterday in Patricia Steer's show, that for all we know, it's something, maybe there are energy forms that are being manipulated to coax people into perceiving the world different to how they perceived it before, planting false ideas, or whatever. Maybe there's some crazy stuff going on so that in the future they can say, news headline, Mandela effect strikes again, thousands of people are reporting believing that they lived on a globe. You know, as a clause to get out of the globe. You know, they can say, no, we've always said it was flat. Look at us. That's me when I was 15. I'm explaining that it's flat. Look. And they, you know.
Back to 1984 yet again.
Yeah. I think it's just an interesting thing. We do misremember things. We can be convinced that we remember things correctly that are different to now. People can be convinced of things. If you retell yourself something over and over, it will become true. So you can have somebody. The reason in psychiatry they don't use the truth serum, sodium penthanate, is that the questions that were asked, and the same with hypnosis, the questions that were asked, say somebody's suffering from something, the psychiatrist believes they might have had some childhood trauma. They ask about the childhood trauma. If the child or the adult doesn't describe the childhood trauma, the questions about the childhood trauma form memories. So were you abused? And suddenly, boom, there's abuse happening. It didn't happen in the real world, but it's happening now in that person's memory. Now, if that person retells themselves this abuse continuously, they are convinced that they had the abuse. The same thing happens with mind control the other way around, where you are physically abused and you're fragmented into thinking that you're hunky-dory and you're a happy person and everything is fine until triggered. So we know about mind control. What is it? What's the Mandela effect? What is it for? What is it doing? Is it something real? It's all, to me, it's all just interesting. You know, that's all it is. That it's associated with a flat Earth, I think it's just coincidence. I don't think it's going to make people think, no, the flat Earth isn't true because Mandela effect. In the same way that I think people aren't going to say that the flat Earth isn't true because of the Bible or because of anything else that they want to use as a reason to think that the flat Earth, that the Earth isn't flat. I don't think people are going to.
You nicely when you say about people reinforcing an idea over and over again in their mind. Excuse me. So if you have, say, if you have a pool in your back garden and you have a glance at it and see that it's got a couple of steps down into the pool, and then you give it no more thought. But from that moment on, every time you think about that pool, you think about it having 2 steps. And then you find out about a massive lie like the globe. And then you start actually looking at things, actually examining them rather than just, like you say, going back to your original understanding that's been reinforced in your own mind. And when you actually look at something, you realize that you were mistaken. You were ignorant of the real fact or the real reality.
Yes. And this is what happens whenever people say that they woke up. It's the same thing. They believed a certain thing and then they realized that that was a belief that assumed was knowledge. So you believe that there are 2 steps and you look and actually it's a step and an extra line that's just to show where the steps are or whatever, and you see more clearly and you think, oh my God, I thought there were 2 steps or whatever it is. When you get to the truth, you see it, you understand that it's the truth. When you have a belief, you believe that it's knowledge. There's a big difference between knowledge and belief, because belief masquerades as knowledge. And most people don't understand which part of their concepts of the world are based on belief rather than knowledge, which is the basis for Descartes' adventure into the realm of doubting everything and coming back to the conclusion that the only thing he could be certain of was that he existed.
I am what I am.
Yeah, I think, therefore I am.
That was it. Sorry, I think, therefore I am. That was it.
Yeah. It doesn't say if you don't think you don't exist. It's saying he knows that he exists because he thinks, because he's conscious. People say it's a circular argument. It doesn't matter. Things are true. Rain is rain because it's rain. You can then look into other things, but it's still rain. Okay. So a rock is a rock. Does it think it's a rock? It's not important. It is a rock. You are a thing that thinks you exist because you believe, that because you think that you think. So you are. You know, it's as
the last point, as this is a flat Earth show, that's probably the nicest thing with flat Earth, that you have had a belief in the globe for your entire life, but you've been living on flat Earth and you've seen flat Earth. And when you finally have the penny drop, you have a realization that it is flat.
Yes, I've been painting the real world. I've been painting crepuscular rays. I've been painting reflections over the ocean. I've been painting these things, and I hadn't thought, hold on, if it was a curve, the reflection wouldn't reach all the way to me. It would either be from some point halfway across, it would be a fraction of what it is. Instead, it's a one straight line. It looks like it's flat. But before realizing we were somewhere flat, I just saw it, and same thing, you know, we're in the world, it's a beautiful thing, and no, look at it, how it works.
But in reality, the Earth was always flat.
Yes.
Antonio Subirats, you have been an absolutely superb guest.
Thanks. Thank you for having me. It's been great. You know, like I've said before, most people, I would say all people, are lovely and gentle inside, and in the flat Earth, it's just a little bit more obvious.
Yeah, definitely. Well, you've been indicative of that today, Antonio. So thank you ever so much for being on Flat Earth UK.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
And to all of you who have joined us in the chat room, thank you very much for joining us. I've been Nathan Oakley. I'll see you all in the next video.